So the message I want to share tonight is to remember that the Lord is always with us, even when we are at our lowest moments and are most discouraged. And so turn to 1 Kings. 1 Kings, we're going to read out of the Bible a bunch tonight, because I really want to give kind of to let the word flow through this whole story here. 1 Kings 18. This is verse 1 says, after a long time. What's been happening is the people of Israel, led by King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, had turned away from Yahweh and were following after Baal and Asherah. And they Jezebel had killed almost all the prophets of Yahweh, and they were just very, very wicked. And so Elijah had prayed. The Lord had instructed Elijah to pray and let the people and the king know that he was bringing a curse on the land, and that there would be no rain. Ended up being 3.5 years of no rain, just a really terrible time. So in verse 1, it says, after a long time, the word of Yahweh came to Elijah in the third year of the drought. Go and present yourself to Ahab. I will send rain on the surface of the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. So Elijah's been hiding out all this time. He's been, where the Lord had protected him, and and a family that he stayed with, but this has gone on for a long time. So now the Lord is going to end this, and he's going to, send Elijah. I won't go through this next section. We're going to skip down to verse 20. Actually, we'll skip down to verse 18. He's talking to Ahab, and he says to Ahab, I have not destroyed Israel, but you and your father's house have, because you have abandoned the Lord's commandments and followed the Baals. Now summon all Israel to meet me at Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. And so Ahab summoned all the Israelites and gathered the prophets at Mount Carmel. Then Elijah approached all the people and said, how long will you hesitate between two opinions? And so here, what I want you to do as we go through this is pay attention to Elijah throughout this whole. We're going to read through the next chapter, and try to put yourself into Elijah's shoes for a minute. Think about the fact that you are in your homeland, you're faithful to God. All of your close associates who are also faithful to God have been slaughtered. You've been running and in hiding, and God has chosen you to bring a curse on the land to punish Israel, to try to bring them back to himself. And over and over again, he's just dealt with so much hardship. And so now he's been asked again to present before the people. I mean, you think about this. These are all people, they're worshiping these other gods. And all of these prophets and the king had once a lot. Yeah,
that's a lot of prophets.
850 prophets, all who are they're under Jezebel's protection and provision. And this is dangerous. He's on his own here, right? And you can understand why Elijah would feel alone, because he presents himself here. Now Obadiah is on his side, That's from earlier. This is the guy who's in charge of Ahab's palace, but it's in secret, right? And so, you can understand why Elijah would feel alone. So then he says, verse 23, let 2 bulls be given to us. They are to choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it in pieces and place it on the wood, but not light the fire. I will prepare the other bull and place it on the wood, but not light the fire. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of Yahweh, the God who answers with fire. He is God. And all the people answered, that sounds good. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, since you are so numerous, choose for yourselves 1 bull and prepare it first. Then call on the name of your God, but don't light the fire. So they took the bull that he gave them, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, Baal, answer us. But there was no sound, no one answered. Then they did their lame dance around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah mocked them. He said, shout loudly, for he's a god. Maybe he's thinking it over. Maybe he has wandered away. Or maybe he's on the road. Perhaps he's sleeping and will wake up. I can picture Elijah posting this on Facebook. They shouted loudly and cut themselves with knives and spears according to their custom until blood gushed out on them. All afternoon they kept on raving until the offering of the evening sacrifice. So they've been going on all day long. But there was no sound, no one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, come near me. So all the people approached him. Then he repaired the Lord's altar that had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the son of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel will be your name. And he built an altar with the stones in the name of Yahweh. Then he made a trench around the altar, large enough to hold about 4 gallons. Next, he arranged the wood, cut up the bull, and placed it on the wood. He said, fill 4 water pots with water, and pour it on the offering to be burned and on the wood. Then he said, a second time, and they did it a second time. So they poured more water on it. Remember, this is during a 3-year drought. The water was precious. And then he said, a third time, and they did it a third time. So the water ran all around the altar. He even filled the trench with water. So this sacrifice and the wood that it's on are completely saturated with water at this point. If you've ever tried to start wet wood, like in a campfire or something like that, it takes a lot of what I like to call Boy Scout juice, or other people call it lighter fluid. I call it Boy Scout juice. So he even filled the trench with water. Verse 36, at the time for offering the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet approached the altar and said, Yahweh, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and that at your word I have done all these things. Answer me, Yahweh. Answer me so that this people will know that you, Yahweh, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. Then Yahweh's fire fell and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. In other words, he blasted a hole in the ground. Even the stones were burned up. When all the people saw it, they fell face down and said, Yahweh, he is God. Yahweh, he is God. Then Elijah ordered them, seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let even one of them escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Wadi Kishon and slaughtered them there. Elijah said to Ahab, go up, eat, and drink, for there is the sound of a rainstorm. And this is probably my favorite story in the whole Bible. And every time I've ever read this, I've always thought of it as just this powerful, climactic, cinematic moment, right? I mean, this is the stuff blockbuster movies, right? And just the power of it all, the triumph over evil, that there's no mistaking it. Elijah is the prophet of God. He's a true prophet. Yahweh is the true God, period. And they wipe out all these false prophets. And he goes on, he says, so Ahab went to eat and drink, but Elijah went up to the summit of Carmel. He bowed down to the ground. Then they're going to go through a little period here where he's praying for rain. He's watching for rain. In verse 45, in a little while the sky grew dark with clouds and wind, and there was a downpour. So Ahab got in his chariot and went to Jezreel. The power of Yahweh was on Elijah, and he tucked his mantle under his belt and ran ahead of Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So, again, Elijah has just done this very powerful thing. He's prayed, and God has answered the prayer and brought rain back into Israel, ending the drought. And then he's going to be the Flash and gird himself up, and he's running faster than a chariot and beats Ahab to Jezreel. And every time I've read this story, those are the things that I thought about. I've thought about the power, the awesomeness of this, the incredibleness of what Elijah does here. And it just bang, 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 bang. All of these things that are mighty, miraculous deeds that make my jaw drop. Chapter 19, verse 1. Ahab told Jezebel everything that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel turned to Yahweh and repented. No, she didn't. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "May the gods punish me and do so severely if I don't make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." So she has vowed she is going to put Elijah to death. Verse 3, then Elijah became afraid and immediately ran for his life. Remember, he's in the town where she is, right? He was at the gate of Jezreel. And so he runs for his life. Now, that part has always puzzled me a little bit. I've thought, wow,
all that stuff.
All that stuff you just did, you'd think you'd go, yeah, whatever, bring it, But this is why I say you've got to put yourself into Elijah's shoes. Elijah has been we read this in just a few minutes. Elijah has been living under persecution, watching his friends be killed, watching his homeland, his country, turn away from his God. He goes through all of this stuff for 3 years of hardship and bringing the power of God in gigantic ways to turn the people back, and his life is still, in danger. She's still going to kill him. So he becomes afraid and immediately ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba that belonged to Judah, he left his servant there. He went on a day's journey into the wilderness. He sat down under a broom tree and prayed that he might die. He said, "I have had enough. Yahweh, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." Then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. This is one tired guy. This is a discouraged man. This is a man who he's at the end of his rope. And it's so funny to see that after what has just happened. And I think about that, and I think about, wow, it's really easy to become discouraged. Because if Elijah can become discouraged after what happened at Mount Carmel, how much easier it is for any one of us to become discouraged in just our daily lives. But here's what I want you to see. Verse 5, the second half of the verse. Well, verse 5, then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. Suddenly, an angel touched him. The angel told him, get up and eat. Then he looked, and there at his head was a loaf of bread baked over hot stones and a jug of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Then the angel of Yahweh returned a second time and touched him. He said, get up and eat, or the journey will be too much for you. Now, the journey is he's going to Mount Horeb, which is in Arabia. It's the mountains of Horeb are where the mountain of God is. That's where Mount Sinai is. And if you've ever seen the videos or read the book, The Gold of the Exodus, there's a mountain right across from Mount Sinai that, or what the Arabs call Moses' mountain, that has a cave in it. And the presumption is that is where Elijah went. But it's interesting because the angel tells him, he hasn't said he's going to Horeb, but he's running away. And the angel says, you're going to need this for your journey. And we're going to see in a minute that this journey was not God's idea. This was Elijah's idea. He's running as far away as he can to go to the mountain of God. And so this is what he has in mind, and the angel knows it. And so the angel is preparing him for this. And so he get up and eat. So he got up and ate, verse 8, and drank. Then on the strength from that food, he walked 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. Now, it's an interesting thing, 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, in the same wilderness that Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in, and didn't eat during that time either.
How in the world?
And so again, you see the miraculous. An angel brings him food. Brings him food that strengthens him for 40 days, a 40-day journey down in through the when they say wilderness, when I think of wilderness, I think of like the Rockies, but that's not the wilderness we're talking about. It'd be better to think about the deserts of Arizona, that wilderness, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's going through this, just barren land. He gets there and he enters a cave there and spent the night. Then the word of Yahweh came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Verse 10. So this is, and we're going to see, God's going to say this to him twice. What are you doing here? Right? And it's this is why I say this was not God's idea, right? This is Elijah's idea. He's tired. He's discouraged. He wants to escape. He wants to get away from Israel and Jezebel and Ahab and all this trouble that he's been dealing with for years, all the pain and the suffering. And so he's gone back to where God started it all with the people of Israel. That's where he is. But so God's like, what are you doing here? And I want you to think about this. God has done all of these things, all of this stuff. He's demonstrated, yep, I'm going to back you up each and every time. I'm going to take care of you each and every time. We didn't even read all the stories of all this time, all these years that he's gone through. Every time he's taking care of him, he's doing all this stuff. That where he had an angel bring him food, that's not the first time that had happened. It had happened before. He ends up staying with a widow and all this stuff that God provides for his care and her care and her children. And they try and capture him, and that was a bad idea. Some people end up smoked. And all of this stuff, but again, he's discouraged. He's done. He's tired of it. And he's tired of life. But God is right there with him each and every step of the way, encouraging him and talking to him. Here he says, what are you doing here, Elijah? And I hear the unspoken word from God, what are you doing here, Elijah? I was already with you in Israel. Right? And I'm not condemning Elijah in this. In fact, I'm saying, if this can happen to Elijah under all these circumstances, how much easier is it for all of us to get discouraged, in all of the different things that we have to deal with, whether it's physical ailments or people in our lives, economic conditions, political issues, whatever it is. Being a biblical Unitarian in a Trinitarian world, Christianity, yeah. All right, so where are we? Verse 10. He replied, I have been very zealous for Yahweh, God of hosts, but the Israelites have abandoned your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are looking for me to take my life. Then he said, go out and stand on the mountain in Yahweh's presence. At that moment, Yahweh passed by. A great and mighty wind was tearing at the mountains and was shattering cliffs before Yahweh, but Yahweh was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but Yahweh was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a fire, but Yahweh was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a voice, a soft whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he repeats it. I have been very zealous for Yahweh, God of hosts, he replied, but the Israelites have abandoned your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they're looking for me to take my life. Then Yahweh said to him, go and return by the way you came to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you are to anoint Hazael as king over Aram. You are to anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel, and Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel-Maholah, as prophet in your place. Then Jehu will put to death whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death whoever escapes the sword of Jehu. But I will leave 7,000 in Israel, every knee that has not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. And so, I look at this story now and I think, that God never left Elijah. He was always there. Even in the end, when Elijah has given up, and this is it for Elijah, he truly has given up. And he wants it to be over. And God is going to honor that request. He's going to go back and do these last things, and then that's it. And
do what last things?
These things he just talked about, anointing these guys, and then turning over his mantle to Elisha. And in fact, when you see Elisha, during Elisha's time, Elisha doesn't have these same problems. In fact, the king listens to Elisha, the king of Israel, and he is, it's not the same kind of situation. And I see that, and I see why Elijah gave up, why he became discouraged, and why he was afraid. But at the same time, what the scripture is telling us is God was always with him. He didn't have to run to Horeb. God was with him in Israel. I don't know what would have happened if he had stayed in Jezreel. I guarantee you she wouldn't have killed him, because she dies right after this. God, puts her to death. And in a spectacularly humiliating way.
Gross.
So, the message I'm hearing the Lord say is, no matter how discouraged you might be, No matter how low your circumstances might be at the moment, I am with you, and I will never leave you. I will always fight for you, and you will always be with me. Amen? Let's wrap up by reading Psalm 27, which I think is a good psalm in light of this. Psalm 27. Yahweh is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? Yahweh is the stronghold of my life. Of whom should I be afraid? When evildoers came against me to devour my flesh, my foes and my enemies stumbled and fell. Though an army deploy against me, my heart is not afraid. Though war break out against me, still I am confident. I have asked one thing from Yahweh. It is what I desire, to dwell in the house of Yahweh all the days of my life, gazing on the beauty of Yahweh and seeking him in his temple. For he will conceal me in his shelter in the day of adversity. He will hide me under the cover of his tent. He will set me high on a rock. Then my head will be high above my enemies around me. I will offer sacrifices in his tent with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to Yahweh. Yahweh, hear my voice when I call. Be gracious to me and answer me. In your behalf, my heart says, seek my face. Yahweh, I will seek your face. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Do not leave me or abandon me, God of my salvation. Even if my father and mother abandon me, Yahweh cares for me. Because of my adversaries, show me your way, Yahweh, and lead me on a level path. Do not give me over to the will of my foes, for false witnesses rise up against me, breathing violence. I am certain that I will see Yahweh's goodness in the land of the living. Wait for Yahweh. Be courageous, and let your heart be strong. Wait for Yahweh. Amen.